if you're just coming to say, oh, geez, I really like to drink wine and I've got a little bit of money because I've did X, Y, Z, and I'm coming to Paso to start a brand because I couldn't think of any other way to spend my money. I mean, bless those people. We need them in the industry. I think that the consumer is starting to really see through all of that, and people want to know what you stand for and why you're doing what you're doing. I think if you have a good story and you have good intentions and you're willing to make this your life, then I think there's definitely space.
Sit back and grab a glass. It's Wine Talks with Paul K.
Hey, welcome to Wine Talks with Paul K. And I'm laughing because I did not push record on the previous take of this show, but I did push record this time. I'm here in Southern California. I am the guy that tasted only tasted 100,000 wines, but sold 17 million bottles along the way. And those 100,000 wines I tasted got 100,000 stories. And I decided Wine Talks is going to tell the stories of the wine business. Why we're on the line today with Jane Dunkley of Bezel Vineyards. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks for having me and allowing me to contribute to one of those stories.
Actually, the first thing I said to you when we got on the call was like where your accent was from, and it's going to lead into other things. And I had a hard time guessing. I got close. I got 50%, but Australia was where we landed.
Yes, it's Australia. And, like in Australia, like we do in other places, we have regional accents. So this is a Western Australian accent.
So Western Australia would be, let's see. The Barossa's in the south, right? Toward the bottom. And so what's in the west?
There's not much in the west, and that's kind of a blessing and a curse. So one of my shtick is kind of that Perth is the most isolated city in the world, and I grew up 3 hours south of there in a small rural town. And I did most of my winemaking in Australia in Margaret River is the wine region down there.
Which is a beautiful region. But so that's interesting. How would somebody from south of Perth in the tiny, I'm guessing either agricultural town or out in the bush, I guess, ends up in the wine trade? How does that happen?
It's kind of funny, isn't it? I feel really blessed I just think that I realized so early on in my life that this was what I wanted to do. I grew up on a beef cattle ranch. And I knew I wanted to be involved in agriculture in some way, but there's a certain smell that you get when you've been working in the cattle yards that kind of no amount of showering will sort of get rid of. And I think that maybe my sensory kind of skills were already honed at a young age. I was like, I can't smell like that for the rest of my life. So I thought, what other avenues are there where I can sort of be involved in agriculture, but in sort of a different way to my family kind of heritage. And winemaking kind of popped up as one of those things that could tick these boxes. And also leaning into the science. I like cooking, I like gastronomy. But, working in a hot kitchen didn't sound like much fun either. And so winemaking it is.
So it was as they would say, an olfactory, decision. I don't want to smell like a cow. And, I know the feeling because my first job, they put me in the cattle processing part of Los Angeles to sell stuff. And I know exactly what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's and it's not even necessarily a very bad smell. Like I have fond memories kind of of that smell, but I just don't need to be smelling that every single day.
Well, and you're in a business that is traditionally and expected to be trigger smells. And this is what's the thing that's really amazing about wine for me and probably for you is that you can smell a wine and 5 years later, 10 years later, approach that glass again, and maybe it's aged, but you still know where you were and what was happening.
Yeah.
When you smelled that. Same with food, right? I mean, the memory of food and the memory of smell and taste is so identifiable as to where and when you are. But how did you end up then in the United States? Or you started making wine in Margaret River, which is a beautiful, elegant part of the winemaking district of Australia. and makes fairly elegant wine. So that's
Yeah.
where you just started. You just said, I'm going to Margaret River and start making wine.
Yeah, I mean, I did my university sort of thing, and I started out going to university in Perth, and I'm actually a terrible student, turns out, but I'm a really good worker. And so I did my first harvest at the winery around the corner where I grew up, and that was in 2002. And the winemaker there at the time said, you can go to a different university so you can work full time and then do your studies. I'm aging myself here, by correspondence, because the internet was.
Correspondence. I haven't heard that term in a long time.
Yeah, which basically means, you teach yourself organic chemistry from home and kind of go over to college twice a year and hope for the best. But that was wonderful because I was able to work and do harvests and also do study kind of at the same time. And so then the theoretical knowledge and the practical knowledge really came together quite nicely and in a meaningful way that made it really sort of sink in.
That's interesting because, there are many winemakers born of a cellar rat and having never studied. And then there's, of course, the completely theoretical winemaker who starts in college and goes through the whole process. But that seems like a rather great balance to be able to sort of be studying at the same time, but you're getting your hands dirty at the same time. And so the question always is, like, if you took the same winemaker and put same vineyard, but one person had been working that vineyard for 20 years. They know it well. By vine, they know the vineyard. And you bring in somebody that's worked all over the world, that's tended vineyards in Argentina, Australia, France, and Italy, and give them the same grapes. Do you get two different wines?
Of course.
And would I guess we can't say in the world of wine that one's better than the other, right? They're just going to be different based on terroir, I suppose.
Yeah, and well, I think the piece that a lot of people miss about terroir is that it's not just the rocks and the weather. The human influence is, one of those pillars kind of terroir. And, we make decisions, we intervene, whether it even be in the vineyard in terms of canopy architecture, the cultural practices we do, the timing of the pick and things like that, and how we handle the wine. There's an infinite number of decisions that get made. And so I think, you could have twins that both went to Davis that do this and they make different wines, So, and I think that's the best part of winemaking, is that it is an expression.
What's your personal philosophy and goal on this? Here you are after you were in Margaretville. Is that what it's called? No, it's not Margaretville, is it?
Margaret River.
Yeah, Margaret River. Yeah. One of the first wines I ever bought on behalf of my father when I started working with him in 1988 was the Lewin Chardonnay, 1983 Chardonnay. It was fabulous wine. It was so
an
good.
Iconic wine.
Yes. And it was part of the Wine of the Month Club at that time.
Awesome.
But after you were in Margaret River, where'd you end up? And then how'd you end up in Paso?
Yeah. So, us Aussies, we tend to bounce around a little bit. And I think, like a lot of people in the wine world, we're all masochists, right? And so I would take all of my vacation time. So I worked at the winery full time, and then I'd take my vacation time, and then I would go and do harvests elsewhere. Because what else are you going to do on your vacation? Because when you're in wine, you're obsessed with wine. So you need more wine. You don't need time off from wine. So I went and worked in Portugal. I went and worked in Italy. And then I was sort of staying put in Western Australia a little bit. I was working at a great winery in a lesser known region called the Ferguson Valley, which is just a little bit further north, a little inland. And we would call it at elevation in Western Australia, but because it's the flattest place on earth.
Yeah.
And then I kind of thought, oh no, you start to get itchy feet a little bit. And a guy who was a mentor of mine received a phone call from Randall Graham, and he had worked for Randall many, many years ago. And, Randall was like, oh, we need help this harvest, would you consider coming? And he said, no, but I know just the person. And he called me up and he said, you need to go and work for Randall in
Wow.
Santa Cruz. And I was like, oh, actually, that's kind of perfect. And so that was 2014. And I thought that I was going to be there for 3 months. And that was 11 years ago. California, I'll just kind of
Wow.
get here.
Yeah. That's a pretty, I mean, in French, stagiaire. I mean, that's quite an opportunity to get under the wing of Randall Graham, as such an iconic guy, particularly in California.
Yeah. And,
Time.
yeah, I've done a terrible job of building my resume with iconic wineries. But I've done a really good job of finding fellow, how do I put this? Like fellow kind of crazy thinkers around the world.
Right.
I'm good at that kind of thing. And that's how, I've been able to find people that have really challenged the way that we think about wine and winemaking and the universe that sort of surrounds that. And so Randall Graham definitely ticked that box, and I was just able to learn so much from him. And then when Bonnie Doon was getting sold, I came down and worked for Gallo at the San Miguel facility, overseeing a couple of different wineries here on the Central Coast, and then ended up working with Randall again as part of the Language of Yes project. So I've been really, really lucky to have a lot of Randall in my life.
This industry is so it's huge, and but it's not going to say it's a fraternity sorority. Maybe it is to a certain extent, because there's so many interconnecting. And I had a woman on the show. Her name is Jessica Kogan. She works for a brand development company now called Connect the Dots. And there seems to be a lot of dot connecting in this industry. I only say that because I had a podcast last week with Jason Haas, whose father was part of the Lone Rangers, who, we started having that conversation, and those guys with Randall would hang out at a restaurant called La Lime's in Berkeley. And that guy who owned that restaurant now makes wine in Armenia and is a very close friend of mine. And I thought, wow, what a crazy connection.
Yeah, you really must be careful in the world of wine, because if you're an asshole to anyone, someone on the other world is going to give you a slap for it. So
yeah, they kind of know what's going on. But it's also part of it's unique in that industry, and that people are so connected, and that there is such camaraderie and knowledge-based sharing and the opportunities to do that.
And I just think that is absolutely the best thing about the wine industry, because, part of with my studies being distance education, when I would go to uni, and we'd sit all of our labs and kind of exams in a couple of weeks, a couple of times a year. But through that, I was able to meet other winemakers, but from different wine regions all around Australia. And they were doing the same thing as me, and different ages, different backgrounds. And we were all able to just get together and with wine sort of forge these really long-term friendships. And then when I travel around the world, even now, people are like, oh yeah, I know this one random person in Australia. I was like, yep, went to uni with them. Yep, actually worked with them some other place.
That's great.
No, it's wonderful. And even we can go and visit wineries and say, hi, I'm a winemaker. I work at this winery. Can you host me? And you have these amazing experiences.
I wonder if that's part of, and I'm not saying this condescendingly, but part of the aristocracy of wine that people find barrier that's difficult to break. I'm not suggesting that is, because I think that this camaraderie and this fraternity sorority aspect
Yeah.
of it is a very important part of, because it's really art and science blended. But I wonder why it's so perceived as aristocratic to
Yeah.
the general public.
Well, I
And
think that I think we think about wine and we think about the chateaus of Bordeaux and, I think that then, and some of that, I mean, otherwise, how could people kind of afford to even make these wines? There is a legacy in a lot of these iconic wineries in the world. And those are the wineries that we learn about when we're learning about wine, for better or worse. And I think that's why it's so exciting to be in California, because it really does feel like there's an opportunity for everyone. And I think we see that in Paso Robles and we see that in the San Luis Obispo coast. There's a lot of young winemakers who, have these small brands that have a very unique point of view. And so I would challenge people to look away from these sort of heritage, legacy, multi-generational
Mhm, mhm.
brands and
I think that's
find what's out there
I
locally.
think that's a good position, but just to touch on it one more time, and then we'll move on to from this. But it's that lineage and that legacy and that um, camaraderie that this industry has, and no other. You don't do this with microchips. You don't do this with
Yeah,
furniture makers. You don't do it with anything else. But wine needs to have that legacy, or at least that uh, assimilation of information and knowledge base, to move the
totally.
needle.
Yeah,
So here you are now, and it sounds like most of your work has been done in the New World, quote unquote. North America, Australia, South
yeah,
America,
yeah,
um, and that's kind of a positive part of moving the needle for what you're saying is getting the consumer involved with all this.
yeah,
But I don't know that you ever get around it. And this is the part that bothers me a little bit online with some of these Gen Zs and millennials talking about changing the language and all the things that go into what actually make wine wine. I
yeah,
mean, in order for you to do what you have to do, you have to know all these things. You have to understand the history. You have to have worked with Randall Graham. You've had to work with Gallo, one of the largest corporations in the country
yeah,
in wine, to do that. And I think that adds to your personal terroir
yeah.
you bring to the table. So Bezel, your current project,
Mm,
is a cake bread company.
yeah,
And it's the cake bread, of course, being one of the iconic early I don't know, influencers or developers of wine in the
yeah.
Napa Valley. Um, so how does this work? It's an independent company? What's the relationship?
No, so essentially, the idea for this kind of started in February of 2020. So I don't know about you, Paul, but I think there are a few people that would kind of had a little bit of extra time on their hands.
Yes, we were busy as we were really busy, but that's okay.
Well, and I think, we talk about Cakebread being kind of a legacy company, and it, it is a family business. And so the Cakebreads were sort of coming up on that 50-year anniversary
Mm.
um, of Cakebread sellers, and then really starting to think, well, what is the next 50 years kind of going to hold? And I think we are all aware that, you know, perhaps it's not the Gen Z and millennials that are drinking these kind of legacy wine brands for whatever reason, whether it be style, whether it be cost. And
Mhm.
so the Cakebreads really wanted to bring new people into their world. And they knew that they couldn't do it in Napa at that price point. And
Yeah.
nor did they want to. I mean, Jack Cakebread, got the money to start the winery from taking photographs with Ansel Adams. And so there is that kind of there's a culture of exploring landscapes, I want to say, within the Cakebread sort of soul. And so then kind of they were able to think, all right, so where can we bring new friends into the Cakebread family
Mm-hmm.
without it being a copy and paste of Cakebread cellars, because Bezel certainly is not that. But there is a similar kind of heartbeat into these wines. And so when they're sort of looking, and, they did, they were really thinking about the whole West Coast of the US for this, and kind of settled on Paso Robles to make Cabernet. And we've got a Sauvignon Blanc that's going to come out next year. And then really excitingly, thinking about cool climate Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. And so San Luis Obispo Coast, which was just kind of a newly named AVA at that time.
That's right.
Just felt like such an exciting place to be. And how lucky am I that we have these two climates where we can grow these varieties in such a short distance, half an hour over the grade, and in a totally different climate than where I live in Paso Robles. So it is, I have a Cakebread email address. It is 100% part of the Cakebread family. But I just have a little office down here in Paso, and I have an assistant winemaker and a grower relations person as well, who helps me out with the vineyard contracts. And we're this tiny little team, and it's, there aren't many people that get to start kind of a wine brand from scratch.
No.
With this legacy kind of behind it. So, yeah, it's a really exciting project.
And how do you find Paso? I mean, I visited in 2004. I bought 60 acres thinking that was going to be my retirement. I'm in the wine trade. This is great. I'm going to go up to the thing. And I found out that I'm a horrible farmer and I'm going to kill everything. And I can't even grow, the cultured kids sets that you buy at Toys R Us. I can't make those grow. And so we decided to abandon that dream because it wasn't for me. But how do you find Paso, being an Australian born and having traveled the world it used to be so rural, and it still kind of is. It's kind of cool as a wine district. It's still got that rural character. It has a rodeo still.
Yeah.
I think it's really unique.
Yeah. I mean, I absolutely love it. I love Paso. Because I think I grew up in, got a beef cattle background,
Right. That's right.
And so when we are out, I, like to go to Creston and all of these other places. And even when I'm working with my growers, I understand these people. And I think that does kind of bring an advantage to, the work that we do. But then we had this great mix of, I think the tourism part of Paso is awesome. So we get a lot of people coming up from LA, a lot of sophistication that comes in, and, we've got great restaurants, good coffee, all of that sort of thing. But really kind of an unpretentious vibe. And I was really lucky when I first came down here. I did a tasting with another winery, and the assistant winemaker there at the time, she said, I'm putting together a female winemakers tasting group. Would you be up for it?
Fun.
Oh, yeah. And so, that was, gosh, I can't even remember how many years ago now, almost 10 years ago. That we've sort of had this tasting group, and that was really sort of critical to me sort of building a community within Paso Robles.
It's interesting. The guy that sold me the property, which was on the Australia River Road, was a cattle rancher, I think, by trade, or his family was. And I think it was up towards San Miguel, up by the lake, Nacimiento up there. And I thought, when you said you were cattle, and I thought, well, it's pretty active there still.
Yeah.
Probably it's a great place. But, this is, let's be frank here. I mean, Paso's come a long way. It used to be a lot of cowboy shops and thrift stores. Yeah. And now you have a French restaurant. I mean, it's unbelievable.
A French restaurant and a Spanish restaurant run by a French family.
Yeah, there you have it. But, it's kind of unique though, right here. It's still rural. It's still great. We love coming there. You got to stop at James Dean's, crash site on Highway 46, all that kind of stuff. But then it's also the scene of like one of the largest wine purchases in the history of America at $1 billion for Dow.
Yeah.
And what an interesting juxtaposition of the rurality of it, but this high dollar amount, which unfortunately is part of the allure to many people that have money in Los Angeles or any part of the world. Oh, wow, look at the money this guy made. Maybe I can do the same. And that's probably the wrong motivation to get in the wine trade.
Yeah.
But an interesting juxtaposition of such reality.
Yeah. And I think that, we do have to thank Dow because, I remember when I first came to California without really much knowledge of Paso Robles and living in Santa Cruz, there was a time where the only red wine by the glass was Dow. And so they just have done such an amazing job of taking that from zero to $1 billion a business. And so to be able to build a brand, I think, to that level that quickly, hats off to them. And I think what's great about Paso as well is, rising tides float all boats.
That's
and
true.
I think there's space for all of us. And whether you're a micro producer in Tin City, and I've been on the other side of that where you're the big guy, and there's space for all of us, and there's a really good kind of knowledge exchange within the community about how we can kind of all help each other out.
In Armenia, which is I'm Armenian by heritage, I spent a lot of time there. In fact, the gentleman that I was talking about that used to own Lalim's, where the Rhone Rangers were founded, it makes wine in Armenia, makes incredible wine there. But it's interesting because it's already gotten to the point where there's so many new brands and there's so many people coming from America to there to try to express themselves through wine that it's almost gotten to the point where and the land is really inexpensive compared to Paso or Napa, of course, but it's almost got to the point where it's partially prohibitive to try and start a brand because by the time you get it to the street, people can't afford what you need to charge for it.
Yeah.
Is it possible in Paso to find a swath somewhere and sort of claw and scratch your way to some kind of brand recognition without the backing of a Dow?
Oh, that's a really, really hard question. Look, I still think we're in the new world. We're in California. If you just got to get scrappy with it. I think there is. Look, and I think that we all know where the industry is right now. There is about to be probably a bit of a reckoning. But people that have a unique voice and have something to say and can say it through wine. If you're just coming to say, oh, geez, I really like to drink wine and I've got a little bit of money because I've did X, Y, Z, and I'm coming to Paso to start a brand because I couldn't think of any other way to spend my money. I mean, bless those people. We need them in the industry. But, I think that the consumer is starting to really see through all of that. And people want to know what you stand for and why you're doing what you're doing. And so I think if you have a good story and you have good intentions and you're willing to make this your life, then I think there's definitely space for you.
I think you just defined something without you knowing it. And you actually just gave me some thoughts about this podcast itself on how it reaches, because there is an authenticity requirement these days. Not that there wasn't authenticity in previous ventures of all industries, but it seems that the Gen Z millennial group relate to that more than they do branding, innovation and packaging necessarily, but just the authenticity of the message. And so when you use the term unique voice, that's almost a synonym for innovation. And because I don't like this conversation that's going on about innovation in the wine trade, meaning we're going to add flavors, we're going to put it in a can, we're going to put it in a box, we're going to put it in a bladder, we're going to market it. And, I've had so many people on the show that think that because they put the wine in a 200 ml can, that's innovation. And that's not.
Yeah.
but the unique voice idea is, and however that unique voice is expressed can be called innovation.
Definitely.
In this trade. So, and I tasted your wines yesterday. They sent me the Sauvignon Blanc and the Cabernet. And the first thing I thought of when I tasted the Sauvignon Blanc is this is, it wasn't a New Zealand because it wasn't quite that much grapefruit, but it certainly had that Southern Hemisphere character about it. Did you bring
thank you.
Yes. So you were trying to do that, obviously, and that's great. That's a unique voice coming from Paso, because many Sauvignon Blancs from Paso are very viscous and not expressive that way.
Yeah. And, I mean, I think for me, the Sauvignon Blanc was a really fun opportunity. And I did sort of put my neck on the line a little bit with that, because everyone's like, it's very hot in Paso. You sure you want to make Sauvignon Blanc? And I had to say, well, I did actually make a living making Sauvignon Blanc blends for 15 years in Western Australia. So I think that wine speaks more to that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have Semillon yet, so I'll put a little bit of Chardonnay in these wines just to kind of replace the role of Semillon, because once again, we're in Paso Robles. We make up our own rules, and so I think I wanted to have a different expression, and especially, these are the sort of wines I like to drink, where I want my palate to be almost cleansed by the wine. I don't want it to be 14% alcohol. And I'm sure that there's a lot of people out there that do, and I think there's a lot of great wines in the market that sit in that space. But I wanted it to be light and bright and vibrant and fun, and just something that people can open up and drink out of one of those Go Vinos in the park in Paso if that's what they want to do. And it doesn't need to be aged. It can be consumed kind of without pretense, and without weighing you down, and making you feel like you can't, I don't know, go to the gym the next day.
You've done that, girl. So, but that's interesting, because though I sensed, Southern Hemisphere, there was a certain minerality to it that told you it was not from those parts.
Yeah.
So even though the nose and the weight had that reminiscence, there was something character about it that was telling me, I'm not so good. I would have said that this is from Paso if it was a blind tasting, but I certainly would have said this is not necessarily from that area, but stylistically it is. Was that on your resume when you came to work for Cakebread? I'm from the New World and we don't have rules.
Oh gosh, probably.
Maybe it just came out in the interview. Who knows, right?
I felt like I did 500 interviews for this job. They were very thorough. Well, I think this job also has its kind of unique challenges. And so Cakebreads were very sure that they did not want to transplant a Napa winemaker into Paso Robles. This is a really cool project because we don't own a winery. We don't own any vineyards. And so I think the reason I got this job is because I can talk to growers. I've done these sort of custom crush things before. It is a different way of getting things from grape to glass that has its own level of complications. And I've already sort of been able to navigate that in a past life many times over. And so I think that was a big part of it, was being able to work in a very non-traditional way. And I think being from Australia and being a very perhaps non-traditional kind of human being, it seemed like a really good fit.
It's kind of interesting too with the Cabernet as well. And there's no denying that the Dows of the world, the Austin Hopes, all fine wines and done very well in the marketplace. If you equate that brand recognition to Napa, you're going to call it Camus and Silver Oak. And stylistically, that's what sells. And we're in the business of selling stuff. Well, let's face it, despite our anticipation and want to be extraordinarily unique and really represent terroir, sometimes that doesn't sell. And so we have to be careful with that. But I found your Cabernet, and you have to understand too that when I mentioned I sold 17 million bottles in my career, they were all between $15 and $25. That was what I did here.
Yeah.
And I found the Cabernet rather expressive for it departing a little bit from this overjuiced, slight residual sugar wine that you might see on the shelf at the market.
Yeah.
For all these other brands that are up there. And I'm not dissing anything. I'm just saying that you did. I saw structure in this wine. I saw an appellation in this wine. And here's the ultimate test. Can I tell you the ultimate test?
Please.
Because my wife, when we got married, only drank Gallo, Rhine wine.
Mm-hmm.
And now she's my biggest critic. And so, and she's a Bordeaux varietal girl. Is just, I can't even stump her into trying a Syrah or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had poured last night. I actually started with a bottle called Blue Rock, which is grown in this crazy soil in Sonoma and very, very expressive and terroir driven. And then we finished that bottle and I was pouring off the Bezel, and I was waiting for her to change expression. I was waiting for her to look at me, say, this is different, or, what is this? She is so smooth. I was so proud of myself. I was proud of you because,
thank you.
because that's not easy to do in my home. But I really was impressed with the structure of that wine. And it's, there was sort of a balancing act between being consumer driven and representing something other than that.
Yeah. And thank you. That genuinely means a lot to me. I think with the Cabernet, we have a really great sort of jumping off point with Cakebread.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd be stupid to not sort of use these wines as inspiration, because it's very easy, because Cakebread Cabernet tastes like Cabernet.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that
shocker.
Cabernet should taste like Cabernet. And so I think that a critical part of Cabernet is that there should be a little bit of greenness. And, just to put these wines in context, I think you almost touched on it, but, the white wines are $25 and the red wines are essentially $30. And I drink, most of my wines that I drink are at that price point.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to be really cautious about that, because it's a big responsibility, because you want to deliver varietal expression, a sense of place, and value. But I think that I don't want to be condescending to the consumer at that price point.
Yeah.
And I think that
that's a good point.
Making kind of a serious medium-bodied wine was a really cool challenge for me, because to your point, those wines that are highly extracted, boozy, a little bit sweet, God, there's a huge market for that, and it's very tempting. But if I followed Dow, I'm going to be 10 steps behind them. I'm never going to be able to catch up, and I don't want to be looking at someone's butt, the rest of my life. And so by able to, go in a different direction, and kind of stake our claim, and in a way that is true to the Cakebread sort of heritage and legacy, where it's, these sort of almost more classic style wines, but they're made to be had with food. I don't want to box people in necessarily with that for Bezel. I'm like, yeah, if you want to have it with food, if you want to grab a burger and have it, great. But I want it to be the wine, not to be a meal unto itself. And it is kind of scary making a medium-bodied wine, because that if you're going to be in a industry tasting, and someone's going to be like, heavy. Light, oh. But yeah, it felt really important to kind of make a different classic expression of Cabernet. But as someone who's done a lot of blind tasting in my life, God damn it, I want it to taste like Cabernet, and still taste like Paso.
A noble pursuit in today's world. But I think with all my experience in doing this and tasting wines, I tasted every Tuesday for 35 years, literally, unless I was sick.
Yeah.
And it still amazes me too when I taste a wine out of that environment and I taste something that's got a little RS and a little residual sugar. It is rather pleasant, and you feel like, oh, this is pretty good wine. But then when you take it out of context, when you put it in a meal or you put it somewhere where it's not sort of it's being analyzed a little bit more because you're in a moment where you're having some friends or whatever over for dinner, it doesn't taste as good. And
yeah, the second glass is always a little bit tough.
And there's been some studies apparently, and I was talking to Tim Hanai of Master of Wine, crazy guy. But he's saying that there's been some studies that palates fatigue with sugar. And so that's why people move on from these brands that they start with that are, I mean, let's face it, all the wines that you see at the supermarket are kind of the same thing, even though they're from different districts. Once you put in so much sugar, it sort of blinds the rest of it.
Yeah, I think you lose varietal expression. I mean, is it delicious? Yes.
Yeah, it's easy to drink.
Yeah.
But your comment about condescending to the consumer is really interesting because that's kind of what it is. It's like, well, we're just going to appeal to you because we know you like this sugar. And I think, and this is what my thought was when I started this part of the conversation was, I think everybody recognizes eventually, whether you're a novice drinker, entry level, or a sophisticated taster, structure. And that structure of that wine, that balance of acid fruit, and then how those things play with each other are what make people hold the glass up and go, this is pretty interesting. And this is really good. Not just good because it's slightly sweet, but wow, I really sense something. There's some emotion in this wine.
Yeah.
And I think that's what happened last night with my wife. She just sort of, regardless of the fact that they're completely different wines. I mean, this thing's called Blue Rock. You probably never heard of it. It's a very small boutique guy. The rock that it grows in is really blue. And so you really get this minerality coming from this blue rock, which I'm not sure what the Latin designation is. But if I can go from that transition to your wine, and structurally she doesn't get any bumps and sugars and things, she's just going to go right into that glass of wine. That says a lot.
Yeah. Well, and once again, being, taking this price point very seriously.
Yeah, it's tough point.
You're trying to balance a few different things. We're trying to, I think we're all trying to bring new friends into wine. And so, I think the core of the Bezel consumer base, should be millennials. I'm a geriatric millennial, so it's a horrible term, but apparently a technical one.
I'm going to use that though from now on.
It's awful, but here we are. But I think I want to be able to have something there for experienced wine drinkers who, like me, buy a lot of wine. I have 2 glasses of wine every single night of the year. It adds up. And so I want to be able to have layers, structure, balance, and depth for those people where a wine can evolve in the glass if they're going to, be having that over the course of the night. But on the flip side, for the more novice consumer, I want this to be bright and juicy and fruit forward. And I think strongly about the aromatics where that entices them. We're pouring these wines, a lot, by the glass. We're doing wine festivals and things like that. Just trying to get people to taste the wine. And I think when you have nice, bright, vibrant aromatics, that can really help bring people into the world for the other people, and then they can move on to structure, balance. What am I tasting? What can I dissect there? But trying to straddle making something for everyone without making something for no one, and without taking the easy way out with sugar is a really fun challenge.
We're almost out of time here, if you can believe that. But was there direction from the Cakebread family to I want you to express Paso. I want you to express your experience. I want you to express whatever. Did they give you direction? Or they say, we just want the best you can make from what you're given?
There was some direction, because there was some wine already crushed from the prior vintage when I started. The blessing that I had was that it was very close to the direction that I would have gone anyway. But my final interview for this position was, teach us about Paso Robles Cabernet. And so in front of the family and sort of the executive team at Cakebread, I did essentially a masterclass in Paso Cat and sort of hovering around that price point. And the question was, what would I do? Mm-hmm. Describe these wines, and then what would I do? And so then I was able to say, oh, I like the fruit here. I like the greenness there. I don't like this oak. This is a little sweet. This is a little boozy. And so I was able to kind of do my pitch before I got the job. And so I was really kind of lucky in that regard. I do take it very, very seriously, though. This is not Jane Dunkley wines. This is Bezel from Cakebread. And the success of this brand is, I mean, it needs to be successful on its own, but it doesn't make sense for it to be the absolute opposite of Cakebread. So I am placing those guardrails upon myself to be true to the legacy of Cakebread. And sometimes that's, using similar coopers and things like that. So I think that makes, having that weight on my shoulders is a very good course corrector itself, even if it's self-imposed.
Well, you said something important. Luck really is, as defined, would be when preparation meets opportunity. So you were prepared for that conversation, and you got the opportunity to present that conversation.
Yeah.
And you landed in a pretty cool spot. I do need some new cowboy gear for whatever reason. That's where I bought my first set of boots I've ever owned, and my first cowboy shirt.
Boot barn is right there.
We'll have to come up, have a visit, and regen my collection here. So it's such a pleasure and honor to meet you, and opportunity to hear what you've been through and your philosophy in wine. But I am due up there. Got a few podcasts I got to line up. So I hope we can have a chance to tilt a glass together.
Yeah, please. I'd love to have you taste some of the other wines.
Yes. So I only got to taste two, but that's okay. That's fine. They're great. Thank you so much for the time today, and good luck out there.
Thanks for having me.